Hello and welcome to Indus News Live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. China has reaffirmed its support to Pakistan in its fight against terrorist forces in the country. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian reiterated that any efforts to sabotage the China-Pakistan economic corridor will not succeed. Last week, Pakistan's Foreign Minister and the Director General of Military's media wing, General Babar Iftikhar, said India is sponsoring terrorism to sabotage the corridor. International experts have warned against the impending danger of genocide of India's 200 million Muslims under the watch of present Indian regime. At a panel discussion in Washington, they alerted the international community to wake up to the lurking danger. They expressed an urgent need to indict and sanction to the Indian government to prevent crimes against humanity. Azerbaijan has retaken the AFGHAN district as part of a deal signed with Russia and Armenia to end the Nagorno-Karabakh war. The Azeri Defense Ministry says units of its army have entered the region. India has crossed 9 million coronavirus cases, second only to the US in the number of infections. The virus has claimed more than 132,000 lives across the country. Mexico has become the fourth nation to hit the 100,000 deaths mark with more than 1 million infections. Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 36 deaths overnight, pushing the total to 7,561. The coronavirus has claimed 1.35 million lives across the world and infected more than 56 million. Rafael Nadal has reached the last four of the ATP finals after beating Stefanos Tsitsipas by 2-1. He will next play Daniil Medvedev in the semi-finals on Saturday. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming up to the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. China has reaffirmed its support to Pakistan in its fight against terrorist forces in the country. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian reiterated that any efforts to sabotage the China-Pakistan economic corridor will not succeed. He lauded Pakistan's efforts against terrorism and said China opposes terrorism in all manifestations. Last week, Pakistan's Foreign Minister and the Director General of Military's media wing, General Babar Iftikhar, said India is sponsoring terrorism to sabotage the corridor. In a joint press briefing, the two unveiled a dossier containing details of India's sponsorship of terrorism. Pakistan's Foreign Office also believed invoices from the US, China, France, and Russia on the dossier. International experts have warned against the impending danger of genocide of India's 200 million Muslims under the watch of present Indian regime. At a panel discussion in Washington, they alerted the international community to wake up to the lurking danger. They expressed an urgent need to indict and sanction the Indian government to prevent crimes against humanity. In his opening remarks, Dr. Gregory Stanton, who is the founder president of Genocide Watch, said the persecution of Muslims in Assam and occupied Kashmir is a stage just before genocide. He stated that the systematic crimes against humanity is already underway in India. Indian human rights defender Indus Special said the violence against Muslims worsens their socio-economic conditions and enables genocidal targeting. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has reiterated his call for a political solution for a lasting peace in Afghanistan. In a tweet, Khan said his visit to Kabul on Wednesday was another step to convey Pakistan's commitment to peace in Afghanistan. He said Pakistan has the greatest stake in peace in Afghanistan after the people of the country. Khan added that peace will facilitate connectivity and trade, bringing prosperity to both Afghans and Pakistanis. He added that Pakistanis in the tribal areas will particularly benefit from peace and trade with Afghanistan. The pharmaceutical giant Pfizer is set to apply for emergency authorization for its COVID-19 vaccine in the United States. This comes day after Pfizer, along with its German partner BioNTech, announced their vaccine is 95% effective to ward off the virus. It will be the job of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration to decide if the vaccine is safe to roll out. It is not clear how long the FDA will take to study the data. However, the U.S. government expects to approve the vaccine in the first half of December. Earlier, world leaders urged the G20 to help close a funding gap to buy vaccines and tests for combating the pandemic. Along with international organizations, the leaders sent a letter to Riyadh ahead of the virtual G20 summit this weekend. India has crossed 9 million coronavirus cases, second only to the US in the number of infections. The virus has claimed more than 132,000 lives across the country, while Mexico has become the fourth nation to hit the 100,000 deaths mark with more than 1 million infections. The coronavirus has claimed 1.35 million lives across the world and infected more than 57 million. More in the following report.
While the world desperately works to put together a COVID-19 vaccine, the virus continues to end thousands of lives and livelihoods every day. In the US, hospitality industry, educational departments, and many other socio-economic dynamics are on the verge of collapse. California's government is set to impose a statewide nighttime curfew as hospitals run out of space.
There is something much more profound about a young death. These things are incredibly emotionally and psychologically traumatizing. You know, it's not time to process that, so we kind of store it away and we keep it moving. But it is like a war. It's like going to war.
Meanwhile, in Europe, a life is lost every 17 seconds as the killer second wave rips through the region. Norway's King Harald and Queen Sonja have gone into quarantine after a member of their staff tested positive for the coronavirus. The EU said European states must only lift restrictions slowly and gradually to avoid another wave of infections. But France's health minister said while lockdowns limit spread of the disease, their effects on mental health are overwhelming.
France, like many countries in Europe, is still facing high pressure from the pandemic. You can see that on this map. That is a whole. Europe is affected by the second wave, despite multiple preventive measures that have been put in place for months by most countries.
Hungary has become the first European Union state to import Russia's Sputnik V COVID-19 vaccine, while the World Health Organization has advised doctors against prescribing Gilead's remdesivir to coronavirus patients. This has cast doubts on the effectiveness of the only antiviral approved by the US Food and Drug Administration.
In Pakistan, 36 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, raising the death toll to 7,561. The health ministry says 2,738 tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said there were more than 33,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 368,000 countrywide cases, more than 327,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said more than 159,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported some 112,000 cases. In the capital city Islamabad, over 25,000 have been infected so far. Azerbaijan has retaken AFGHAN district as part of a deal signed with Russia and Armenia to end the Nagorno-Karabakh war. The Azeri Defense Ministry says units of its army have entered the region. AFGHAN is the first of 3 districts to be handed back by Armenia. As part of the deal, Yerevan agreed to return some 15 to 20% of the territory captured by Baku in recent fighting. This includes the historic town of Shusha. The 6-week conflict killed more than 1,000 people, including civilians, on both sides. Ethiopia claims its forces are closing in on Mekelle, the capital of the restive Tigray region. Government spokesperson Ridwan Hussein said federal troops have won a string of victories in the fight. The government says the Tigray Liberation Forces have turned renegade and are holding on to power illegally. the chief of TPLF, Debretsion Gebre-Michael, confirmed that federal troops bombed Mekelle. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's communications office said Tigray forces also fired rockets on the city of Bahir Dar in the Amhara region, but said the rockets caused no damage to the city. The 2-week-old conflict in Tigray has killed hundreds of people and forced over 30,000 to flee into neighboring Sudan. In Uganda, opposition presidential hopeful and musician Bobi Wine has been released on bail. He was charged with holding rallies likely to spread the coronavirus. Wine was arrested on Wednesday during his election campaign in the country's east. His detention prompted nationwide violent protests, killing 37 people. In recent years, Wine has inspired the youth with his calls for President Yoweri Museveni to retire after 36 years in power. Thai government says it will charge 2 high school student leaders for joining a banned protest last month. This comes a day after Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha threatened tougher action against the demonstrators. Police say the 2 student leaders were summoned to acknowledge the charge and will be questioned in the presence of their parents and lawyer. The students said they had been summoned for violating an emergency decree of joining a protest last month. Since July, Thailand has been gripped by mass protests demanding the resignation of Chan-o-cha and reforms to the monarchy. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has officially been declared winner in the state of Georgia after a manual audit. The Secretary of State's office said a hand tally was necessary to meet the confidence threshold required by law. The audit reaffirmed Biden's victory by 12,284 votes after 6 days of counting. Trump has been trying to overturn the election results in multiple states by reaching out directly to Republican legislators. Meanwhile, Biden has rejected Trump's latest claim of winning Michigan after challenging the results. He said the recount in Georgia endorsed his victory and the same will happen in Michigan.
No, I'm not concerned. The vast majority of the American people, they've already, all the polling data has indicated, although the Republicans who worry about it is higher, but over 78% of the American people believe it's, without question, it's legitimate. I just think it's, and I think most of the Republicans I've spoken to, including some of the governors, think this is debilitating. It's not it sends a horrible message about who we are as a country.
And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now moving on to the U.S. says Iraq wants to maintain its partnership with the coalition forces to fight ISIS. Central Command Commander General Kenneth McKenzie says U.S. presence has successfully limited Iranian and ISIS activities. In a virtual conference, McKenzie said the progress of the Iraqi forces has allowed the U.S. to reduce its numbers. But he said coalition forces have to be there to help prevent ISIS from reconstituting a cohesive group. He said ISIS has some 10,000 supporters in the Iraq-Syria region who remain a real threat. The general also said measured retaliations also limited what he called Iran's proxy attacks in Iraq. Earlier, the Pentagon announced it will cut down troops to 2,500 on President Donald Trump's order. Libya's permanent representative to the UN says mercenaries are still being deployed in the country. Speaking at a Security Council's teleconference, Tahir al-Sunni said Tripoli is still dealing with Khalifa Haftar's attacks. Al-Sunni said mass graves are being discovered on a regular basis. He added that Libyans are dying due to mines installed in the capital. The envoy said military activity is ongoing in areas under Haftar's control. He said weapons are still being sent to Sirte and Jafra cities. Al-Sunni called for accountability for war criminals and speeding up the establishment of a setup to hold the December elections. The Arab League has condemned U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to Israeli settlements in the West Bank and Golan Heights. Pompeo has become the first U.S. Secretary of State to visit Israeli-occupied lands. In a statement, League Secretary General Ahmed Abul-Ghaid called Pompeo's tour a flagrant violation of international law. Ghaid said the visit encourages the construction of illegal Israeli settlements, which is the greatest obstacle to peace. Damascus has also slammed the visit as provocative and a violation of Syria's sovereignty. During his visit, Pompeo announced plans to allow products from Israeli settlements in the West Bank to be labeled as made in Israel. But Palestine says made in Israel tags will not legitimize the settlements, which will be gone sooner or later. China has strongly criticized an upcoming visit by the head of U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to Taiwan. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson says Beijing opposes all official interaction between Washington and Taipei. Zhao Lijian said China will give a legitimate and necessary response to the developing situation. In a press briefing, he urged Washington to fully recognize the sensitivity of the Taiwan issue. Earlier, Taiwan's Premier Su Tseng-chang announced Andrew Wheeler's visit to Ireland on invitation from Taipei. Su said Wheeler is set to have bilateral talks on international cooperation on environmental protection issues with Taipei. He added the trip will further benefit the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan. China has rebuked the Five Eyes Security Alliance over accusations of silencing critics in Hong Kong. The Foreign Ministry warned the UK, US, Australia, New Zealand and Canada to stay out of China's internal affairs. Spokesperson Zhao Lijian said they should be careful lest their eyes be plucked out. He said China does not create trouble but isn't afraid of anything, no matter it has had 5 eyes or 10. The alliance criticized Beijing after 4 Hong Kong lawmakers In India, 14 people, including 6 children, have died in a road accident in northern Uttar Pradesh state. District Police Chief Anurag Arya said the children were all between 7 and 15 years of age. Police said the incident took place when an SUV rammed into a truck on the Prayagraj-Lucknow highway. The Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister has announced a compensation for the family of the victims. Christmas trees have officially become essential shopping in France as the government granted an exception from lockdown rules. The announcement has brought a sigh of relief for those related to the industry. More in the following report.
The ongoing pandemic means this Christmas is likely to be very different to those in previous years. But there was at least some good seasonal news this week as the French Ministry of Agriculture issued a decree stating Christmas tree sales will be allowed from Friday onwards. Preparations are underway as tree producers and sellers say they are confident sales will be good despite the COVID-19 lockdown. The government decision came after intense lobbying from the industry, which feared a total collapse of its annual sales.
We are relatively confident this year. All Christmas tree producers took steps along with the parliamentarians, senators and sub-prefects of each region to emphasize the fact that it was absolutely necessary to sell Christmas trees this year as essential products for us to be able to make a living from our work.
A florist in Paris says he hopes Christmas trees will sell well as it is an important holiday where people gather with their families and with the traditional tree. But to make sure he would not be stuck with leftover trees, the florist has come up with a smart strategy.
We don't know yet. We are in the dark because of the pandemic. We do not have a precedent as we've never seen this. So we don't know where we're going. What I am going to do is I'll keep a stock of trees, and when that stock reduces to a certain threshold, I will order more.
Each year, 6 million trees are sold in France, of which 80% are homegrown. However, the cut trees are not popular with environmentalists. Several of France's Green Party mayors have said their city will not have Christmas trees this year, but will instead feature festive displays of live plants and trees.
Douglas Stewart has won the Booker Prize for Shuggie Bain, his debut novel about a boy in 1980s Glasgow. Chair of Judges Margaret Busby said the decision was unanimous and only took an hour to reach. The 44-year-old Stewart wins $66,000 and is only the second Scot to have won the prestigious literary prize. He dedicated his book and his prize to his mother, who died of alcoholism when he was 16. Other nominees were Sitsi Dangaramba, Avni Doshi, Maza Mengisid, Brandon Taylor, and Diane Cook. Among those who contributed to the ceremony were former U.S. President Barack Obama. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now moving on to the business stories. The European Union says Britain and the bloc have made better progress towards a trade deal in the last few days. But the bloc's chief executive cautioned that there is still a lot of work to do for an agreement by the end-year deadline. Ursula von der Leyen says Brussels will find a way after seeing a lot of momentum on important issues. The EU chief executive said there is still some meters to finish the line. Brussels and London are at odds over fishing rights, fair competition guarantees, and ways to resolve future disputes. Britain left the bloc in January, and the estranged allies have since been locked in complex negotiations for a free trade deal. The International Monetary Fund says it has reached a staff-level agreement with Egypt after the first review of a $5.2 billion financing. In a statement, the IMF said a $1.6 billion tranche will be dispersed upon the approval of the executive board. It said the Egyptian economy performed better than expected despite the pandemic. Inflation fell to its lowest levels in a decade, remaining below IMF targets despite quickening in October. This year, Cairo negotiated 2 new loans worth nearly $8 billion to cushion the economy amid COVID-19. Wall Street stocks have opened slightly lower over fears of fading stimulus and blow to the economy from rising COVID-19 cases. JP Morgan Chase and American Express were among the worst performing stocks in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, whereas the indices of S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite also traded lower. Meanwhile, oil prices remained steady on COVID-19 vaccine hopes. In tennis, Spain's Rafael Nadal has reached the last four of the ATP finals by beating 2019 champion Stefanos Tsitsipas. The Spanish world number 2 overcame Greek Tsitsipas at 6-4, 4-6, 6-2 at the O2 Arena in London. The 20-time Grand Slam champion will play Russia's Daniil Medvedev in the semi-finals on Saturday. In another contest, Russia's Andrei Rublev defeated Dominic Thiem of Austria at 6-2, 7-5 in straight sets. The loss comes as a wake-up call for Thiem, as he is already through to the last four. In the Spanish La Liga, Real Madrid captain Sergio Ramos has suffered a hamstring injury on international duty with Spain. Ramos was substituted in the first half of the team's 6-0 thrashing of Germany. Ramos will miss Real's next 3 games, which include the crucial Champions League fixture against Inter Milan. Real have lost 7 of the last 8 Champions League matches in which Ramos did not play. The Catalonians are 4th in the La Liga table and 3rd in their Champions League group. Real face a grueling schedule with games against Alaves, Sevilla, Borussia and Atletico Madrid over the next 3 weeks. Newcastle United confirmed they are in a legal dispute with Premier League over a failed takeover bid in the summer. Earlier, a Saudi Arabia-backed consortium withdrew its $460 million offer for Newcastle. The Premier League said the bid failed after the consortium declined independent arbitration and voluntarily withdrew. But Newcastle accused the league of acting inappropriately in rejecting a takeover offer. The club revealed the legal case in response to alleged leaks by the Premier League. In a statement, the club said it understands that these will be matters of great concern to its fans. It added Newcastle have no choice but to respond and update its fans. Two-time winners, England have been drawn against Six Nations rivals France in the Rugby World Cup 2021 pool stages. Defending champions and host New Zealand will face Wales and Australia in their group. Ireland and Scotland are yet to secure their places in the tournament, and their qualifiers have been postponed. Former champions, the United States, are in Pool B alongside Canada, and yet to be determined qualifiers from Europe and Asia. England are currently ranked number 1 in the world after beating France last weekend. The RUGBY World Cup will take place from 18 September to 16 October next year, with the final being played at Edinburgh. And now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.